Hi folks, Jenny Seelig here, also known as New Uke New York on some parts of social media. I am finally back with the final video in my series on transposing for ukulele and voice. Now, if this is the first video you are watching in this series, you should know that there are 4 previous videos about transposition, specifically talking about ukulele and talking about transposing for a couple of different reasons. Possibly you're transposing for your voice to make a song easier to sing. Possibly you're transposing to make a song easier to play because of the chords that you know or are able to play. And possibly you're transposing for both and trying to find some middle ground. So in this series, I've covered a lot of different topics and I'm going to briefly run through them. But I just wanted to say, as a general overview, in case you haven't been watching this series, that this is one of my one-take tutorials in which I sit down in front of a camera, live streaming a lesson on either a song or a particular technique. I don't do a lot of editing to these. In fact, I usually do none at all. And I will just be coming in to clean up the beginning and the end if necessary, put in some timestamps and some links, and then post it. This is for everybody. I post these publicly on YouTube. But if you like this kind of content, you should know there's more. If you visit me over on Patreon and you subscribe for 1 month or more, you'll find more of these kinds of lessons and tutorials. You can make requests for what kinds of lessons and tutorials I do. I have patron exclusive song sheets and chord charts. And then of course, you're also supporting all the public stuff. I do, including right now, I'm doing 4 public online play-alongs on Zoom and YouTube per month. So feel free to join me for those, even if you can't or don't want to support me on Patreon. I hope that you'll take advantage of the stuff that I have available for everybody, but I really do appreciate those who are able to support me for a month or more because it helps me take more time to do things like this, where I get to help people learn what they want to learn on ukulele, play what they want to play, and we're building a little bit of community as we do it. So for this one-take tutorial, as I said, we're going to finish off my transposition series. And just briefly, again, if you haven't been watching, in part 1 we talked about the basics. I'm looking at my notes here as I tell you this. And again, what I just went through, though, the reason somebody might be transposing, also how you can do it in part 2, then we talked about specifically how to find that common ground between what's easy to play versus easy to sing. You want something that's both, ideally. And we actually looked at Somewhere Over the Rainbow and did it in a whole bunch of different keys, and you could kind of play along or sing along with me. Find out what key might work for you, or what keys, because there's not usually just one perfect key. Depending on the song, it will change. Then in part 3, we talked about how to transpose using tools that will transpose for you. So websites that transpose, and we went through those. We talked about capos, which is how I pronounce it. I know some people say capo or capo, but we talked about capos and different styles and tips for using them, and we talked about learning to make bar chords to transpose and movable chord shapes a bit. And then in part 4, the most recent part, which was several months ago because I've been doing a whole lot of different holiday things lately, so it's been a little while since I've made one of these videos. We talked about tuning, retuning your instrument, it's specifically the ukulele, up or down a half step or 2 in order to transpose. So I gave some examples of that and of retuning using the baritone, things like that. So all of that has led up to this final video, and in this video I've been promising to talk about how to transpose using your brain. I'm not sure what to call this. It is, of course you can do it on paper, you don't have to do it all within your mind, but this is less about using the tools and the tuning and more about thinking about how transposing works. Now I will put timestamps and links in the description box, so I hope you will use them to either skip around or go read web articles that I have found that explain this even more at length, because I'm just going to give you sort of a brief overview of each thing I want to talk about, and then I'm going to let other people who already have great content on the internet take over and teach you the things you want to go more in depth into. But I just want to talk about how you can start to think about transposing. I think I just started to say and didn't finish my thought that this isn't going to be an instantaneous thing for most people. Just like music theory, some things sort of sink in through osmosis the more we play. Some things we have to learn about, especially depending on how you learn. You might like to read about it in books. You might like to take a workshop, listen to somebody talk about it in a video, and I'll put some links to some videos that might help you too when I'm putting in my links. But this is the sort of thing that you should just take whatever clicks for you in this lesson today, in this workshop, and work with it for a while. Come back to this video or another video or article later, see what works for you then, and just use the tips and tricks and tools that are working for you, and know that the more you play, the longer you play, the more of these things that will kind of click into place. Also, something I often talk about with my students and my patrons is that if you have any kind of a musical background other than, learning to play the ukulele, which some of us do and some of us don't, you will have a little bit of a leg up potentially. If you can read music, you might have a little bit of a leg up. Certainly if you know the musical notes and scales or keys in order, that can be very helpful just in terms of thinking about this. I'm going to talk about that in just a second, but especially if you know the piano keyboard. And that's one of the first things I'm going to talk about is the piano keyboard, learning how to translate the piano keyboard to the fretboard, and also just having a visual image of the piano keyboard in your mind might really help you do some of this transposing. So I always encourage players to either use that knowledge if you have it, or get a little bit of familiarity with the keyboard if you don't have it, and it can be really helpful. I have made a handout for this whole series that we've used in some videos and not in others, and I'm going to share it on the screen during this lesson, probably a fair amount, because I think that a lot of what we're talking about here does have to do with this particular handout. And the first thing I'm going to talk about as I'm sharing this on the screen is that piano keyboard. And there are other websites that talk about this too, and again, I will put lots of links in the description box. But basically, when we're dealing with an ukulele, you may not have ever sat down and sort of looked at what key, white or black key on the keyboard corresponds to what note. And certainly this image here that I got, at a free website that allows people to download their images of keyboards shows you what key corresponds to each note, but this isn't a whole piano keyboard, obviously. So I will just tell you that, the sort of home note on a piano keyboard is usually considered the C. And in fact, in the middle of the piano keyboard, there is a white key that we call middle C. And so looking at this keyboard, let's say that this C right here in not quite the center, but sort of in the leftmost third of the keyboard, that is our middle C. And that's going to correspond with your C string on your ukulele. So I have a low G right here in front of me, and that C string on a low or a high G would be the same as a middle C when it's tuned, to a tuner or to a piano, or however you go, pitch pipe, whatever you have to tune it. Those two notes are going to correspond. And then when you go from a white key to the key next to it, or a black key to the key next to it, whether it's another white key as you see between E and F, or whether it's going from a white to a black like F to F sharp, or F sharp to G, that's a half step. And a half step equals 1 fret on your instrument. So you'll see here too that on these black keys, it gives you 2 names for each note. It is the same note, whichever name you're using. And if you get deeper into music theory, you'll see there's rules for when we call, for example, this note a C sharp versus a D flat. But if you go up from the C, you can see why we might call it a C sharp. Sharp is raising it. If you go down from the D, you can see why we might call it a D flat. D is the flat is lowering the pitch. So going up from the C to the C sharp is 1/2 step. And it's also 1 fret. So if you press your finger down on the first fret of your C string, you're now playing a C sharp or D flat. And then if you scoot one more up, you're playing a D. And if you scoot one more up, you're playing an E flat. You scoot one more up, you're playing an E. Now E is another string we have on the ukulele. So you can hear that if you go to your next open string, you're playing that E note now. From E, we can continue to go up in half step increments to the F. There's no black note in between those 2 white notes, so it just goes E. First fret of E is F, then you go up to F sharp, then to G. Now on a high G instrument, which I have one next to me as well, so I'll pull that out. On a high G instrument, that G is going to be the same as your G string. So you see here by looking on the piano keyboard, because as we go to the right on this piano keyboard, our notes are getting higher, that G is the same as my high G on my high G ukulele. So I've actually gone towards my face if I'm a right-handed player, or I've gone, to the fourth string if I'm talking about numbering strings on the ukulele. It goes A is 1, E is 2, C is 3, and G is 4. So I was on E, which is the second string, and now I have to go to I don't have to, but I can go to that fourth string. This is the difference between a high G ukulele and a low G ukulele, or a high G ukulele and a guitar, or a baritone ukulele in many cases, is that the tuning is what we call re-entrant, meaning this higher note G comes on a string right before a lower note C, which is unusual in a lot of cases. A lot of times you go straight from string 4 to string 1 that goes lowest to highest. That's not lowest to highest. You actually have your lowest note on string 3 here, your C string, which is your middle C sound. So then if you're going from a high G to middle C to E, you're actually starting with a high note, then going lower, then going a little higher, and then your final string is your A string, and that's string 1 on your ukulele. But that is higher. If you look here, it's higher than the G string, but not a lot, just 2 half steps. You can actually go from your G string, then play your first fret of the G string, you're on G sharp or A flat, and then your second fret of the G string is already the A note, which is the same as your A string. Now, the difference between that and a low G is that low G is going to take you down for the G string. So you actually are going from lowest to highest when you play G, C, E, A on a low G ukulele. So the G below middle C is going to be your G string on a low G. And then you can actually go up several, half steps. Let's count them. G to G sharp or A flat, G sharp, A flat to A. Now that's an octave lower than your A string, but not the same note. Then A goes to A sharp or B flat on the 3rd fret. Then you're going up one more to B. Now here's another place where there's no black key in between 2 white keys. That just happens twice in this sort of musical layout of a piano. It happens between the B and the C and between the E and the F, that there's no note there. So we are now at the B, and then we get to the C by going one more fret up. And you hear that's the same as your C string. So basically the 5th fret of your low G instrument is where you match up with the next string on the exact same pitch. And for that reason, because those are the same, you can see that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 extra notes that you wouldn't have on a high G ukulele, because you're starting all the way down here in the G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes below the C. So that is why some people, for some songs, like to have a low G. It gives you an extra 5 notes, 5 pitches below that C string to play with. You don't always need that in every song, and you don't always want that. Sometimes you really want that re-entrant sound of moving from the high G to the C. It can make picking sound really cool. Even if you're going in quote in order of the strings, you're not going from lowest pitch to highest pitch. There's just different effects you might want to give. Now, that's not what this video is about, but I wanted to go through those notes and how they correspond to the fretboard, because you can think about transposing in terms of the piano keyboard or in terms of the fretboard if you know the notes. And so if it's confusing for you to think about in terms of the piano keyboard, then I especially encourage you to learn your fretboard. But even if you understand the piano keyboard, I would encourage you to start thinking about how that translates to your fretboard. Because when you're thinking about transposing, what you're doing is taking chords, if you're playing chords, as opposed to, I'm not really talking about how to transpose tab or instrumental fingerstyle pieces here, because that gets a lot more complicated. If you're going from a C chord to a D chord, you can think in your head, how many half steps up is that? I'm going 1 half step up to C sharp and then another half step up to D. And whatever I'm doing to move to the key that I want to be in, I need to do to all my chords. So if I'm moving 1, 2 half steps up to D, then let's say there's also a G chord in that song. I need to move 1, 2 half steps up to A whenever I see a G. So this is a way that you can start thinking about transposing, that if you're looking at a page and you know that you need to play it in a higher key, and you want to just either think it in your head or write it down on the page, how you want to transpose it, what all these chords become as you transpose them, rather than using a capo, or maybe you don't have it on a website that you can change it really easily, you don't have the internet, where you are. You'll be able to think, okay, if I'm moving my key up 2 half steps from C to D, then every chord I play, I need to move 2 half steps up, and that's how I discover the name. Now, if the piano keyboard is new to you, it may take you a while to remember that from B to C is just 1 half step, and from E to F is just 1 half step. That is a really important thing to get into your brain if you're going to think about the piano keyboard, and also if you're thinking about naming the notes. But for a beginner who's just starting to think about this, I think it might be helpful for you just to, and you can certainly use charts and look at pictures and things like that, but every once in a while, start naming as you're playing the notes, and instead of just always playing chords, think about going just G, G sharp, A sharp, and then you might want to remind yourself A sharp is B flat, B, and then C, and then check in with your next. When you get to a note that's supposed to correspond to another string, you can check in with that. And you can do that on a high G or a low G. You can also do an exercise where you play a chord, like say the very simple C chord that's played 0, 0, 0, 3, and you can think about, okay, what notes am I actually playing in this chord? I'm playing, in this case, a low G, so that's the G below middle C. I'm playing that middle C. I'm playing that open E, but what note am I playing on the A string? And you can count up if you need to. You're on the 3rd fret, so you can go from A to A sharp or B flat to B, and then between B and C there's no notes, so you go to C. So I'm playing G, C, E, C in this C chord. And you can even hear, you just said out loud, I'm playing 2 Cs. You can hear, I hope, that that's the same note. It's just in what we call 2 different octaves. One's higher, one's lower, la, but those are the same note, just in different tones. So that's another thing you can do to help yourself learn your fretboard and figure out what notes are where. That doesn't necessarily have anything to do immediately with transposing, but it is great if you don't know the piano keyboard to be able to say, okay, I'm moving from C to D. Okay, that's 2 half steps, so I need to move everything up 2 half steps in terms of thinking it through. You can think about it in your ukulele keyboard too, so you can think, okay, if I also have a G chord, what's 2 half steps up from my G note? Oh, it's the G sharp A. Okay, so I'm also playing an A chord instead of a G chord now. Those kinds of things. All right, so I also want to show you a resource you might like to use. So I'm just flipping over to it on my internet browser so I can show this to you. There is a free virtual piano that I like to use when I am needing a piano for anything, but this is one I liked that is called virtualpiano.net. I use it for a lot of different things, but one of the things you can do is see, you can play it with your keyboard, obviously. That's what the notes are here. And then I think, yeah, so it also has the note labels. So if you turn the note labels on under Key Assist, you can actually see the names of the notes, which is what I might like to do if I was trying to remember, for example, what 2 white keys don't have a black key between them. It can be really helpful. Now here's your middle C, C4. So we can see here on this page, again, I'll just show you, your high G tuned ukulele would go G4, C4, E4, A4. My dog has fleas. And your low G ukulele would go G3, C4, E4, A4. I played that wrong. Well, let's try that one more time. My dog has fleas. So it's a little bit different. It doesn't do the way we think of the high re-entrant, my dog has fleas. And so I just wanted to show you that this is a resource they can use if you find it helpful to you to have a keyboard to actually look at on the screen that's free to use. And of course there are piano apps and things like that too that you can use that you might also find helpful. All right, going back to my notes here, I'm just going to keep checking my notes to make sure I'm telling you everything I want to tell you. There are also great websites like this one, Music Theory 101, that I found. Let me find it here. There it is. Where you can look into more, and I'll put this link in the box, you can look more in detail at this part of music theory where it talks about the notes, it talks about how they move. Now when we're talking about notes being in order, or even if we're talking about the notes, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, how they're numbered in a key, we usually think of them as going in this order. You can think of it in two ways. You can think of it as starting with A and sort of go alphabetically, or you can think of it as starting with C and go sort of from middle C up. And it repeats over and over because, as you said, as I said, the piano keyboard, you know, has that same shape that just repeats on either end. So it shows you from C to C, basically, it would be an octave, would be the notes that you would have, and then obviously when you get to the end and C you hit C again, you're now going up into a new octave, but the notes go in the same order. So what that means is, and let's go back to my handout here. What that means is you can think of it in two ways. You can think, sometimes it's helpful for people if you don't know the piano to think of it alphabetically. So you can think A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then it starts over. G is the last one, then A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way up and down, as low or as high as you can go on your voice or your instrument, or you know, whatever you're thinking about. Theoretically, it goes on forever. You can also think about it, especially if you have prior piano background, as C to C. And if you have played piano in the past, you probably remember that already. That you go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then you start over again at C, D, E, F, G, A, B, etc. So it's good to know that order is what's happening whenever we're talking about transposing, whenever we're talking about the sort of numerical systems we're going to talk about in a little bit, that's the order that they happen in, so that if you end up needing to number something, you would number it in that order. Like if you're in the key of C and you need to number your chords, it's going to go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So you get back up to C on 8. And more about that in a few minutes. It's great to think about this sort of as it works for you. I don't want you to feel like you absolutely have to understand all of this right away. Sometimes it can be really easy to get stuck in the parts of music theory that are not clicking for you. So again, it's just, if something resonates, musical pun not intended, if something resonates for you and is feeling like, oh, that makes sense to me right now, then that's great. And then the tools or tips and tricks that I give you that aren't working for you yet, you can set aside and come back to later if they start to make more sense. For example, as I was just showing you on that music theory website, you can see here they've just sort of visualized for you in a different way the notes in order with the sharps and flats, so that you can see again how it's climbing up from A to A, getting higher as we go up to this A. And they've shown you there's no sharp and flat again between B and C, between E and F. So that's just another way of visualizing what it is we were talking about. Now I do have a graphic here, I believe, that shows, maybe I don't have that. I thought I had a graphic here that shows what your ukulele is doing. I don't actually see it. Just looking for a second to see if I can find that. Oh, here it is. Oh no, that's just showing you that's showing you. Well, this is interesting. Let me just show you this too, because this is something that goes along with what we're talking about in terms of transposing. That this post is showing you, and of course there's no absolutes. You could certainly fall outside of this range no matter what gender you are, but it's showing you the average female voice range here, and it's relating it to middle C. So you can see it actually goes down to that low G note, or if you don't know the piano keyboard, you can take my word for it. It goes from that low G up to a high D here. And then it also, it says it down here too, G to D, about 1.5 octaves. And then the average male voice is going to go from an even lower C, so an octave below your C string or your middle C, up to about that G that we have on a high G ukulele. If you can hear that down on the floor that I just played it. So there is a significant amount of overlap, which is right where our ukulele sits. So you don't need to have a high voice to sing with ukulele. You don't need to have a low voice to sing with low G or baritone or anything like that. Any voice can sing, even if you were playing notes that are up here, you just wouldn't be singing necessarily the exact same notes as you would be if the instrument were playing in your range. So changing keys can still mean that the actual notes that you're playing on an instrument are too high or low for you. But as I've mentioned in other videos, then when we sing up or down the octave, we find the sort of range that we can sing in relative to those notes that are being played on our instruments. So that's a misconception I hear people say sometimes, where they feel like, oh, I need to have a high voice to sing with a high G ukulele, and you do not. If the song is too high for you, you can transpose it lower, and or you can sing it lower while still staying in the same key. And again, if you haven't watched those other videos, that might become more clear for you if you look through those videos for the sections where I talk about changing the key to suit your voice and singing up and down the octave. All right, so let's see here. Just gonna see what I want to talk about next. Let's see. So we talked about how each fret is a half step, which corresponds to one note, white or black, on the keyboard, and how it's helpful sometimes to know the piano keyboard or the notes in order, and to remember that we don't have a sharp or a flat in between B and C or in between E and F. Let's see here. And then I want to show you another way to think about changing keys that you can do half in your head, half on paper, and that is by using a tool called the circle of fifths, which you may have heard about before. Circle of fifths have lots of uses. The circle of fifths that I like best can be a little overwhelming to look at first. The reason I like this circle of fifths is because it has a lot of information on it you might want to use if you were doing songwriting, if you were trying to figure out the chords for a song that you don't have a good song sheet for, or you have a song sheet that you don't love, that you're thinking maybe there's another chord that would work better in this spot than the chord that I'm playing. And it's also great for transposing. But I'm going to show you this more complicated circle of fifths, and then I'm going to show you a simpler one. So the more complicated one I found through the Ukulele Underground website. I like this circle of fifths because of all the information it gives you. And of course, it's ukulele specific, because you can find guitar circle of fifths and things like that too. But this is showing you how to make the chords on an ukulele, little, graphic that shows you where your fingers would go. It's also showing you in each pie wedge, it's showing you a family of chords. So it's showing you a C family, a G family, a D family. It's going up by fifths, C, D, E, F, G. Remember I said you have to sort of count in order. So if you go from C, including C, count up 5, you get to G. And then from G, you'd go G, A, B, C, D. That's why the next one is D. D, you'd go D, E, F, G, A, and you get to A. It goes like that all the way around the circle. It also is showing you here off to the side key signatures, which means it's showing you how many sharps or flats. And you see it's pretty cool the way the math of this works is that C has no sharps or flats in the key signature. You move over to G, it has 1 sharp, then 2 sharps for D, 3 for A, 4 for E. It goes all the way around changes to flats and then goes back down. So when you go up and around the circle of fifths in order, you can actually start to learn your key signatures too, if that's interesting to you. You may be like me, who played piano for years and never really was sure what key signature she was in unless she really counted out the math. And you could start to internalize this if you wish to. This can be helpful if you're playing instrumental pieces, or especially if you're trying to write your own pieces. But if you don't need this information, that's fine too. The other thing that's cool is that you can use this for transposing. So as I was talking about in my example earlier, if you're going from C to D, like you're thinking, okay, the song's not quite high enough for me to sing, I need it to be a little higher, or it's hard for me to play in C, although it wouldn't be necessarily for ukulele, but let's just pretend. Let's say I can't play these chords in the key of C, I want to play it in the chords in the key of D instead. You can see you go 2 pie slices forward for the key, so you can apply that to your chords too. Like there's a difference between the key that you're playing in, which is the whole collection of how the song flows, and you could be in multiple keys in a song, but we're not going to get that complicated right now. But let's just say you're in C the whole way through. You have the C family chords, which actually is not just this individual pie slice, but usually includes some aspect of the 2 pie slices on either side of it. So if you're playing something in C, you may have any number of these chords in the middle wedge where it says C, but you might have some of these G chords as well. You might have some of these F chords. You could have other chords too, but in general, the pie slice of the key that you're playing in and the ones on either side really go harmoniously together, which again can be great if you're writing a song as well. But let's say I'm in the key of C, I'm going to the key of D, and I do have a C chord that I'm playing. Then I'm also going the same spacing on the circle of fifths to find, okay, what's my new key? What does C become? Okay, it becomes D because I went 2 pie slices over for my key, so I go 2 pie slices over for my chord as well. And let's say in this song in the key of C that I'm changing to D, I'm also playing an E minor. Well, I know I need to go 2 pie slices over for that as well. So I can take E minor over, and now I'm playing F sharp minor. And another way you could do this is you could think in your head, the piano keyboard or the fretboard, and think if I'm going from E minor on E and I go 1 half step, then I'm actually playing an F minor, and if I go a second half step, I'm playing an F sharp minor. But if it's easier for you to do that by looking at the circle of fifths, that's definitely another way that you can do it, and some people will find that very helpful. So this is another way of visualizing it that you can, if you don't have a website, or you don't have a musical whiz with you who can tell you all the chords to play, a circle of fifths can be really helpful. Now let's look at a simpler circle of fifths for those of you who are feeling overwhelmed by that one. The simpler circle of fifths that I have is actually in my handout, which I appear to have closed. We're live, folks. Let me open it back up. Okay, I've got too many things open on my window. So here is a simpler circle of fifths that I found on the Ukulele Go website. So here you can just see the key, the main chord in a key, and also its sort of relative minor. That just means the minor chord that goes along with it, or the minor key that would be related to it. So you can use it the same way. You can say, okay, I need to take this song lower, and I'm playing C, and I could go down to B, but that's not quite low enough, so I need to go to B flat. So then you can see, same thing, but you go in the other direction as when we did C to D. You're going 2 chords over. So if I'm playing C in this song, and I need to change my key 2 half steps lower, then I'm going over 1, 2 to B flat. If I play an A minor chord in the song, now that becomes a G minor. If I was playing, let's say, a G in this song, then that's going to now become an F. So you can use these simpler circle of fifths for that as well. All right, so another way that people transpose sort of on the fly that takes some mental calculation and maybe a little bit of memorization in order to get it speedy. You can get there slowly if you're just starting to learn it, but it can take practice and some memorization in order to get there quickly. Well, there's 2 related systems that are called Roman numerals and also the Nashville numbering system. And I just want to show you examples of these. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail because there are other videos and resources that will, you can get as deep into this as you want to. But for example, a jazz band or another combo might play using one of these numbering systems to allow them to very easily change keys, maybe to suit different vocalists they might be working with, or just to get the sound that they want. And it's an easy way, it's a shorthand sort of for how to communicate the chords that are being played. So there's a couple of different ways we can think about the Roman numeral system and the Nashville numbering system, and they are sometimes confused. So you might see someone calling something Nashville numbering system, but then you look at it and it's Roman numerals. That's fairly common. But in general, here's a website that I'm going to link below that's really helpful in talking about the differences between the two chord systems. In general, they're gonna both be based around this idea of what I already talked about, which is that as you count the notes on the scale in order, you can put them with a number. So again, this is saying here what I already showed you on my fingers. C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, G is 5, A is 6, B is 7 in the C scale. And that would be the same thing in any key. So you can use this and translate it into Roman numerals. And that would be what you would do to talk about the chords in the key. So the C chord, they would represent with a 1. Now, some of these, as it says in this article, are uppercase and some are lowercase Roman numerals, and usually this is representing, unless you got someone who just doesn't know how to write it out, this is usually representing major chords with the uppercase and minor chords with the lowercase. And this has to do with how scales are built and what, when you have a whole step and when you have a half step, and how chords are built then within that scale. But in general, it becomes easier to read this than maybe to create it from scratch when you're first starting out. But we can at least look at this together and say, if E in the key of C, the E chord is I, which is a 3, but they're lowercase, then that's actually going to be an E minor. And the F, uppercase 4, would be an F major. So we can look at that. And even down here at the bottom, it's got a little extra symbol because that's a diminished chord, which is also a minor. So B minor diminished is the 7 diminished chord. So that is going to, that pattern is going to replay in lots of different, well, all the different keys if you're in the major keys. And then we can take progressions, and I'm just highlighting it here on the page that we would play, and assign those Roman numerals to them, and then we'd know what pattern we're in. So if you're in the key of C and you're playing 1, 5, 6, 4, you're playing that C, G, A minor, F. Let's count it out just because I know a lot of us are beginners to this. You're going from C, which is 1 in the key of C, to a 5, C, D, E, F, G. That's your G. Then we're going to a minor 6. So you can go up one more from the G, which was 5, and go to A minor. And then we're going to a major 4, C, D, E, F. So that's how we get the C, G, A minor, F. And that means that if we transpose this, again, we'll keep going with our example of D. If we transpose this into D, we'd keep the same progression for the same song. And now we're thinking 1, 5, minor 6, 4. And we'd go D for 1, D, E, F, G, A would be your 5. So instead of the G, you'd play an A. Then for the 6, we go up one more, and we're playing a B minor because it's lowercase. And then we're going to the 4, D, E, F. Sorry. We're going to the 4, D, E, F. Oh yeah, because I'm going up. Sorry, for a second I thought I was transposing down again, and I really confused myself. D, E, F, G. So because we're going up, and the 4, we're going from F to a G. So that C, G, A minor, F becomes D, A, B minor, G. So I really twisted my brain there. The Nashville numbering system then, as this article goes on to explain, instead of using Roman numerals, numbers, and uses symbols instead of uppercase and lowercase, because of course numbers don't really have uppercase and lowercase. So it goes more into that. And this is not a video about how to do Nashville numbering or how to do Roman numerals. So I just wanted to mention that as another way, especially if you're playing with bands, if you're playing with ensembles, you may find people using either of those systems with the numbers in order to be able to transpose on the fly. And it often does take a little bit of sort of experimentation in order to get it to sink in. A lot of trying it out in low pressure situations where you're not being told you have to do this immediately in order to play along with our group. But for example, I went to a folk festival last summer, and there was a jam group that I joined in the afternoon that was just calling out the numbers of chords. So they'd say, we're in G and we're going to play 1, 4, 5. And then I would think, okay, 1, 4, 5 as quickly as I could. And you know, the more you do it, the more it starts to become a little more automatic as you recognize progressions. And especially if you know the song being played, you can hear when you've done something wrong. But if you're playing a 1, 4, 5 in G, you can, if you have the time, you can think G, A, B, C, and then D. So G, C, D, that would be my progression. So again, I'm not saying that anybody who's just starting out will necessarily want to do this right away, but I wanted to complete this transposition series by talking about this at least. And then if you're interested in hearing more on this, if my patrons are interested in practicing this with me, we can certainly discuss it further. But let me show you a few more resources that I'm going to leave for you in the links so that you can explore them more on your own. And this video will probably be a little shorter than some of our other videos because of that. So one of the other resources I want to show you is how on Jim's Ukulele Songbook website, which a lot of people I know use, you can actually change the song that you're playing, such as, here we have You Are My Sunshine. You can change it to Roman numerals. Look here under layout, you can click on show Roman chords, and it's going to open a new window for you that's going to show you the Roman chords. Now this means I could play it in any key, but I would have to, I mean, you can play any song in any key, but I could easily transpose if I know what these numbers correspond to. So if you're in a group that like to play different keys on different days and everybody knew how to read this, you could just have a chord chart that looked like this, and then say, okay, we're playing it in G today, we're playing it in C today, and then people would know or would figure it out if they need to take a little more time on it because they're newer to it, what that corresponds to. So that can be a cool thing to test yourself on. Like come in here to the Jim's website, change it to a Roman numeral layout, a simple song that you know how it's supposed to go, and then try to figure out what the chords should be in the key of C. Say, pick something easy like the key of C. And then if you can play it, you'll probably be able to hear, oh, I have played that correctly. If your ear isn't quite that developed, then that may not be a good exercise for you, but that's something that you can certainly try. All right. Then I want to go back to another website that I'm going to leave you is on praisecharts.com, which is not a website I'm familiar with, except I really liked this graphic that they had here that shows you in each of some of the more popular keys, major keys, what would your numbering system look like? And it's showing you both in Roman numerals and in the Nashville numbering system that you're in, if you're in the key of F, and you need to play a 4 chord, it's a B flat. So you could have a little cheat sheet like this in your, you know, in your case, in your songbook, tucked into your binder, whatever you have. You could take a picture of it or, you know, save this graphic on your phone, a screenshot, and have an easy reference guide for something like a jam or a group that's playing songs that don't have terribly complicated chord progressions, but they're going to be changing keys. Or you might want to use this even for your own transposing to say, okay, now I want to try this in a different key, and I happen to know this song is, you know, 1, 4, 6, 4, or whatever it happens to be. You could try it in different keys and see what you like best. So that's another resource I will leave you. And then let's go back to my handout just to finish things off. And look at that one more time. Just to share with you what else is on this handout that you might like to look at. So it's got another chart that is simpler than the one I just showed you, but is sort of a quick reference if you're playing something with just a couple of chords. And the reason I wrote this one in here was because I thought we might want to practice it on You Are My Sunshine. And so let's try it in this video. And I've also given you links to a great video from Tyler at 10 Thumbs about using chords and Roman numerals, and another link there too. So let's give it a try though before we end this video. My song sheet here, not song sheet, but this, I've typed out the first verse of You Are My Sunshine. And I've given you the chords in the key of C. So it starts with You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy, the F when skies are gray. Back to C. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. It's a pretty safe bet to think we're in the key of C here, right? And if you look up above at my quick reference, that again does not show you the whole scale. You can see C is your 1 chord, F rather is your 4 chord, and G is your 5 chord. And that's really all you're dealing with here. And we can count that to make sure it's right. We can say C is 1 because that's a key I'm in. Then if I want to figure out what F is, I can count C, D, E, F. Oh, that's 4. And then I can continue to count to G, which is 1 more. Oh, that's 5. So I can see that I'm in a 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 1, 5, 1. That's my chord progression that I'm doing, which means that I can change keys either using this chart, using your head, using the circle of fifths, whatever you find most helpful, and you can kind of challenge yourself to try different ways if you want, by remembering that I'm either going to be moving the same amount to get from one chord to the next. Like if I say I'm going to be playing an E, then I'm going to go C, D, E, and I'm going to play E instead of C. If I'm playing the F, I'm going to go F, G, A, and I'm going to be playing an A. And if I then at the end of this song have a G, I'm going to go G, A, B, and I'm going to have what is here a B. There we go. Started to play B flat. I distracted myself. So you can see that that corresponds with what's up on the chart here, which is just another way of getting to the same place. So I can also say to myself, okay, I was playing C, F, G. Now I'm going to be in the key of E. I'll be playing E, A, B. But sometimes, sometimes checking what you're doing can be really helpful. I just opened that link for myself again. Let me go back to the song sheet. So if I'm doing that, I've got the E instead of the C. My sunshine, my only sunshine. Change it to A. You make me happy when skies are back to E, gray. You'll never back to A. No, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take. Here's the B. My sunshine away. And on E. And we could do that in any of these keys and play the 1, 4, or 5 chord as it pertains to what the song originally was, but in a different key. So that can be a really helpful way of thinking about it. And to finish this off, I thought we could just do one more sort of example like we did in video 2 of a song in a bunch of different keys. I did this in a workshop once before and people found it really interesting, and especially if you haven't watched video 2, we'll just tag at the end of this at the end of this video that you can sneak into this section if you want. You can skip it if you don't want it. We're going to play I'll Fly Away, just a portion of it, just the verse and the chorus, because then you'll experience where the highest note and the lowest note is. The rest of it is all just repeats of those same melodies. In 5 keys, and you can see what suits your playing best, what suits your voice best, and what is best for both of those things combined. And then let me know in the comments, did you find one key overall in I'll Fly Away was the best for both your voice and playing? Did you love playing it one key but hated singing it in that key? Let me know what you think. So let's start with G. I won't be able to sing it in all these keys either, so don't feel like you need to be able to sound good in all these keys. Now you're going to have the option of going up the octave or down the octave, and I'm going to experiment with it so you can see that live as we go along. So if I'm playing it in G, I'm going to either be singing song, for some. I can already hear that one's too low. So I'm going to start up high. 1, 2, 3, 4. Some bright morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. Here comes a high note. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away in the morning when I die. Hallelujah, by and by. I'll fly away. Not my favorite key, but not hard to play. It's a nice one to play. Let's try A. So now we are going up in key, but I'm going to sing, I'm going to try singing it lower, because if I go up with my voice, it's going to be even higher for me, which I already know. I was kind of at the peak of where I wanted to be today. So I'm going to try singing it down the octave and see how A works for me. 1, 2, 3, 4. When the shadows of this life have gone, I'll fly away like a bird from prison walls has flown. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away in the morning when I die. Hallelujah, by and by. I'll fly away. Only 1 or 2 notes in that were a little lower than I wanted to go. So this is getting better for me. Now we're going to go to C, which is quite a bit either higher or lower, depending on how you're thinking about this and where your vocal range is going. If you think about it, from A, we go A, B, C. So it's 3 steps in terms of, our numbering system, but actually how many half steps is it, like frets or keys on the keyboard to go from A to C. You're actually going A sharp or B flat, then B, then C. There's no sharp or flat in between B and C. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're either going quite a bit higher or quite a bit lower. I'm not going to go any lower, obviously, because that doesn't work for my voice. So then if I'm playing it in C, my voice is going up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, how glad and happy when we meet. I'll fly away. No more cold iron shackles on my feet. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away in the morning when I die. Hallelujah, by and by. I'll fly away. Okay, that wasn't too hard for me to sing or play, so that's a nice key. C is nice. Now let's try it in D. I'm going to keep going higher now, because I already know that's the direction I'm going from A to C. So I'm going to keep going for D and see if it gets too high. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just a few more weary days and then I'll fly away to a land where joys will never end. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away in the morning when I die. Hallelujah, by and by. I'll fly away. Okay, I really like that key for myself vocally, and in fact, that's the key I have this song in my songbook. But it was not that much better than C. So C is also a really nice key for my vocal range. You let me know what your experience is. And then when we get to I'll Fly Away in F, I'm going to go high again because I know that G is a little too high for me, but F is between D and G. It's going to go D, E, F, G. So I'm just curious, will this one also be too high, or will I be comfortable in F? 1, 2, 3, 4. Some bright morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly that was not hard for me to sing. It was higher, definitely. It might be too high for some people watching this. It is harder to play, though, for people who aren't very happy with the idea of playing an F7 and a B flat shape. So that might be a reason why, even if you could sing the F key notes well, you might choose not to play those chords. So then you have some other options that we've talked about in the other videos. And in fact, as I started doing this, I thought, I think I already did this exercise with you in an earlier video, but I started this workshop so long ago. I'm not positive 100%. So this is either a review, if you've gone through the whole thing, and this was maybe in video 1 as well, or it could be that I'm doing this for the first time. And I'm very curious to go back and look after I turn off this this live stream. So if you've had to skip that because you already did it in video 1, I totally get it, but it might be a nice review anyway. The final thing I thought I would do with this that I know we didn't do in video 1 is to talk about what the chord progression is here in terms of numbering, just in case you're curious, because again, it'll be the same in each key. So let's just look at the key of C, because it's often really easy for ukulele players to deal with the key of C in various ways. If you're starting with C as your chord 1 in the key of C, and then we look at C7, so you've got a 1-7 chord. Then in every key you see there's a 7 chord as your next key, as your next chord rather. The G7 and G, the A7 and A, the D7 and D, F7 and F. So that is, you know, equivalent. Now you're going from then to from C7, or we'll just talk about C again because we're on that 1 in terms of numbering, to F. C, D, E, F. That's up 4. So that means that, again, we'll just look at another example like G. When you're in G, G, A, B, C, that's why you go to the C chord on I'll Fly Away. And then we go back to our 1 chord. So we've gone, I'll just write this here so we can actually see it. We've gone from 1 to a 1-7. I'm not writing it in Roman numeral, or I should write it in the Roman numerals. We've got 1, then you've got 1-7, then we said we went to a 4, then I'll put it on the correct line so you can kind of see how it works, and then we go back to the 1 chord, right? That's what we just said. Then on the next line, no more cold iron shackles on my feet, or in, you know, in any of the verses, the 3rd line of the verse, you're back at a 1 for that whole line, and then on the final one, you've got another 1. Now we've got a G7 in the key of C, so C, D, E, F, G. That's 5-7. And if it doesn't make sense to you why I just counted to 5, then you know, let me know and I'll see if I can clarify it in the comments. But hopefully I've explained that well enough you can understand it. And then we're back to a C at the end, so we're back to the 1 chord again. So that chord progression from line to line is going to be the same on each of these songs. So again, looking up at G, if you know you're going from a 1 to a 1-7, you're going from G to G7, and then you're going G, A, B, C to a 4, back to G for the 1, it's not a Roman numeral, and then you're staying on that G for the 1, then you're staying on that G for the 1 on the final line, then going to 5-7, G, A, B, C, D, that's why we have this D7 here, and then going back to the 1G. And that would hold true for any of these keys that we just played it in. So that is how you can figure out what a chord progression is if you want to, and either express it to someone else that you're playing with, or write it out for yourself if you're transposing and figure out how to move it into a different key. And I hope that is helpful to you, but if it doesn't feel helpful to you today, it may feel helpful to you in 6 months or a year or 3 years. So no matter where you are on your ukulele journey, I think a lot of us hit a point where we want to be able to transpose. And that is why I made this series, whether you're transposing for your voice, for your playing, for a little bit of both, to play with an ensemble that's all playing different instruments, to play with an ukulele ensemble when you're holding a baritone, and most of them have G, C, E, A strung instruments. There's lots of different reasons you might transpose. I hope if you haven't watched the other videos in this series, you'll consider going back and at least watching portions of them that interest you. But again, I will put timestamps, I will put links, everything in the description box so you can skip around to your heart's content. I may have been a little repetitive in this one, mostly because it's taken me so long to finish this series, and for that I apologize. I am you know, learning as I go, and I always appreciate people letting me know what the most useful parts of videos was. If there was a question I did not answer, or that my answer or explanation was not clear to you, that can also be helpful feedback. Let me know that. And thank you again to my patrons who support me each month and really make it possible for me to take the time to do videos like this and to hopefully be getting better at them. So I will continue to teach and to share and to appreciate you for being here when I do. And if you have ideas for other video topics, for other songs you'd like me to teach, for other music theory topics, or various techniques on the ukulele you'd like me to talk about in these one take tutorials, please let me know. I look forward to doing the next one, and thank you very much.